Can a novel monoclonal antibody help patients with severe chronic rhinosinusitis? Is Toripalimab without concurrent cisplatin an appropriate regimen for patients with nasopharyngeal carcinoma? How are drug manufacturing facilities affected by climate-related disasters? This and much more on today's JAMA Editor's Summary. Hello, and welcome to our listeners around the world. Today is Friday, August 22nd, 2025. I'm Dr. Kirsten Bibbins-Domingo, the Editor-in-Chief of JAMA and the JAMA Network. For this episode, I'm joined by JAMA Deputy Editor, Dr. Preeti Malani. Hello, Preeti. Let's get started.
Hi, Kirsten. Chronic rhinosinusitis with nasal polyps can significantly affect patients' quality of life and productivity. Dr. Shen and colleagues investigated Stapokibart, a novel monoclonal antibody, as a treatment for patients with severe, uncontrolled chronic rhinosinusitis with nasal polyps. The CROWNS-2 trial was conducted at 51 hospitals in China and enrolled adults with severe, uncontrolled chronic rhinosinusitis with nasal polyps. Study participants were randomly assigned to receive either subcutaneous Stapokibart or placebo 4 weeks after initiation of mometasone nasal spray, a topical corticosteroid. In terms of the primary outcome, the authors measured changes in nasal polyp score and nasal congestion score at week 24. They reported that Stapokibart reduced polyp size and the severity of nasal symptoms.
The editorial for this Phase 3 randomized clinical trial is by Dr. Platt and colleagues. They explain that using biologic therapies for chronic rhinosinusitis could usher in a new frontier for this condition, including the use of inflammatory endotyping. It will be very interesting to see what lies ahead, as molecular biomarkers could help guide more effective treatment approaches to this common condition.
Absolutely. It'll be so interesting to see how these results might change clinical practice. We had a chance to hear from one of our JAMA associate editors, Dr. O'Connor, on why he's excited to see these results published in JAMA. He mentioned that chronic sinusitis with nasal polyps causes ongoing symptoms and impaired quality of life for affected patients, and available therapies often don't solve the problem. The CROWNS-2 trial provides solid evidence that a novel treatment, Stapokibart, which is administered by subcutaneous injection once every 2 weeks, and which appears to have an acceptable safety profile, provides clinically meaningful improvement to patients suffering from this condition. Dr. O'Connor notes that this trial adds to the evidence supporting the treatment of asthma and rhinosinusitis with injectable biologics, which have revolutionized the management of these disorders. JAMA also published the Phase 3 trial by the Diamond Study Group about a new combination therapy for local regionally advanced nasopharyngeal carcinoma. Cisplatin has been a routine part of the treatment for nasopharyngeal cancer, but causes several serious toxicities and some side effects like severe vomiting that diminish quality of life for patients. In this trial, investigators used the monoclonal antibody Toripalimab, which targets programmed cell death, PD-1, and omitted some of the standard cisplatin treatment. Specifically, in this randomized trial, patients received either 17 cycles of Toripalimab with gemcitabine cisplatin induction chemotherapy and concurrent cisplatin radiotherapy, or the same regimen without concurrent cisplatin. The investigators measured failure-free survival and the incidence of vomiting. Patients in the Toripalimab group without concurrent cisplatin had non-inferior 3-year failure-free survival and lower incidence of all-grade vomiting compared with the standard therapy group.
Sounds like a treatment regimen that could be very helpful as an option for patients. There are 2 public health-focused research letters published this week in JAMA. Let's talk about those next.
Sure, let's start with a letter about federal vaccine advisory committees. Recently, there's been attention on potential conflicts of interest for members of vaccine advisory committees. Dr. Cantor and colleagues looked at the prevalence of reported conflicts of interest of attendees at meetings of the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, ACIP, and the FDA's Vaccine and Related Biological Products Advisory Committee, VRBAC, from 2000 to 2024. They concluded that reported conflicts of interest for these committees declined over the study period to reach historically low levels through 2024.
Another research letter is part of the JAMA Climate Change and Health series. Extreme weather, like hurricanes, can disrupt important pharmaceutical supply chains. Dr. Shahzad and colleagues investigated how climate change-related disaster events occurred in counties with U.S. drug production facilities. Using the FDA Drug Establishment Current Registration Site and FEMA Disaster Declaration Database, they found that from 2019 through 2024, roughly 2/3 of all U.S. drug production facilities were in counties that experienced at least one disaster declaration. Many institutions have been affected by these events.
Doctors Blumenthal and Galvin published a perspective titled The Vocabulary of Our Discontent, in which they discuss some of the business terminology used when describing the marketization of healthcare. Their article includes terms like commercialization and corporatization, and they point out growing challenges in balancing market and non-market values in the healthcare sector, noting that marketization has not resulted in a higher functioning healthcare system.
A very timely perspective. There are also two viewpoints that may be of interest. Dr. Gendreau and colleagues advocate for more inclusive cancer registries for gender-diverse patients. And in another viewpoint, Dr. Wells proposes the adoption of a 3-year medical school model in light of federal student loan caps.
We also have a thought-provoking viewpoint in response to the recent grant terminations of programs focusing on LGBTQ plus health, racial and ethnic minority groups, and HIV prevention programs. Dr. Chan and Nunn explain how this could lead to significant setbacks in addressing the HIV epidemic.
Let's turn to the clinical reviews and education content. Dr. Ashburn has a very helpful JAMA review on hemorrhoidal disease. Readers can learn more about internal and external hemorrhoids, especially common misdiagnoses. And there is a JAMA Clinical Reviews podcast that goes along with this review. Listeners can hear Dr. Ashburn discuss the current evidence on the epidemiology, pathophysiology, diagnosis, and treatment of hemorrhoidal disease in discussion with JAMA senior editor Dr. Karen Lasser. Let's listen a bit to their discussion.
The thing that comes to mind is how common hemorrhoid disease is and how commonly patients assume that any anorectal problem is hemorrhoid disease. I think this cannot be emphasized enough. So many patients minimize their symptoms. They are uncomfortable or embarrassed to bring this up. And I think it's important for the generalist to know that all hemorrhoidal complaints should be evaluated by a lot of the measures that we've talked about today, with a low threshold of referring for a surgical evaluation if bothersome to the patient.
There's also a JAMA Insights by Dr. Drucker about the treatment of atopic dermatitis, also known as eczema. Knowing how many clinicians see this skin condition, this is certainly a must-read. The review includes a helpful table of systemic treatments. The JAMA patient page this week covers iron deficiency anemia, including symptoms and iron supplementation information. It's a great complement to the JAMA review that came out earlier this year on the same subject.
This week, we have another installment of the JAMA Plus AI podcast series. Dr. Perlis, the editor-in-chief of JAMA Plus AI, interviews Professor Mello about creating transparency and establishing trust with patients when it comes to AI and healthcare. Let's listen to a bit of their discussion.
So what do you think about the responsibilities of organizations to publicize their use of AI in other ways, right? To put it on the website or in the brochure, your surgery will be assisted by an AI device. Because it's sort of funny to me that a lot of health systems are very excited to publicize their use of AI, but they don't necessarily get into the specifics of where patients might encounter AI in their care.
It's a great question. And, one of the reasons we thought about that pretty carefully is that the framework that we're proposing doesn't result in a lot of cases where patients are going to get a direct notification about a specific AI use case. But we didn't want to leave the impression that we feel like that means there's no transparency obligation at all. I would think about this in the way that I think about other patient safety efforts that go on in the hospital, that a responsible hospital is going to communicate with patients about the efforts that it makes to keep them safe. And also, in this case, to ensure that its workforce is rested, ready, and has sufficient morale to provide good quality care. Indeed, when we interview patients, this is the kind of thing that they tell us, you don't need to bother me with this right before surgery, but I'd like to know generally how the organization is using AI, what are the types of functions that it performs in the hospital, even more importantly, what steps it takes to make sure that that use is safe and responsible and is improving the care and improving the staff experience. So that's where I think, however anemic it may seem, basic public communications, whether on a website or in other fora, can be helpful in letting patients know this is happening. It's a good thing that it's happening. And we know that because we do X, Y, Z to measure the effects and make sure that it's working well for people.
And finally, don't forget you can keep up with the latest articles in clinical medicine, biomedical research, public health, and health policy written and researched by our outstanding JAMA Medical News team at jamamedicalnews.com, or you can click on the link in the show notes.
Thanks, Preeti, and thank you for tuning in to hear what's new at JAMA this week. These highlights were brought to you by Dr. Preeti Malani and me, Dr. Kirsten Bibbins-Domingo. This episode was produced by Shelley Steffens and Dr. Krista Roberts at the JAMA Network. A link to this JAMA content can be found in the episode's show notes. To follow this and other JAMA Network podcasts, please visit us online at jamanetworkaudio.com. Thanks for listening.
This content is protected by copyright by the American Medical Association with all rights reserved, including those for text and data mining, AI training, and similar technologies.